How did I buy my first house? That is a good question. Now, when I was 17 years old, me and my mom drove from North Carolina. I had worked at Applebee's as a dishwasher, making $5 an hour, and I saved $5,000 in 6 months. Okay, so it can be done. We drove from North Carolina to Washington State. We gave away everything that we had. We were like, we're gonna go kind of start a mission up there. We found 20 acres of land. It was zero down, zero interest, and it was $169 a month. It was $16,900 for 20 acres of land. This was in 1990, okay? Then I cut down trees and I built a log cabin when I was 17 years old. That was my first house, but that doesn't really apply to most people that live in the city. So the next house that I got was because my soon-to-be father-in-law said, if you can find houses for me to flip, then I'll pay for them, you do the work, and then we'll split the money. It never ended up working out. However, I did go find some houses. I put in a bid on a house, and then I got the bid, and then he backed out. So then I was like, how am I gonna pay for this house? Now I'm committed, or I'm gonna lose my money, earnest money, whatever. And so what I did was I found out that you can just basically wholesale a house. So I sat down at a table at a title company, and the people that had the house, I bought it from them, and immediately somebody bought it for me. So I used their money to pay them off, and I made a little bit. I made $1,500 in the process. Now, how about one that I bought myself and had to actually get a loan on? In 1995, I was 22 years old, and I found a house that was $15,000. Now, this house was junk, okay? The fire department used it to test, to like, hey, this is how you break into a house in case it's on fire, and they tore pieces off the roof, and it was falling down. It was 700 square feet. It was a tiny house, and they intended on tearing it down, but I bought it for $15,000. Now, I had to buy it for $15,000. I had to get a loan because I was poor, and then I took another $25,000 and I redid everything. I took a 700 square foot house and made it into an 1,880 square foot house. I added a second story. I did all new plumbing, electrical, gas lines, all of that stuff. I learned a lot, okay? I had to get a loan from Mellon Mortgage Company, and it's a hassle. It's a hassle to get a loan, and I forget how cheap my house payments were, but they were pretty cheap, and I was able to pay that loan off. So the way that worked was I got one loan for $15,000, and then I had to kind of get draws on the other 25, and then there was a second closing where I paid more fees to get the first money and the second money tied together in one mortgage, and which it's a normal thing to do. So I got tired. So then Mellon Mortgage sold my loan to Bank of America. Bank of America never seemed to get it right because I made bigger payments and extra payments and things like that, and their numbers were never right. And finally I was just like, how much do I owe on this thing? Can I just pay it off? And it was like 13,000 something, and at that point I had the money, and so I was just like, here's a check, goodbye. And it was the first time that I ever got like a payoff letter, and it was like, let it be known to all men that John Tennell now owns this house, blah, 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 blah. There are no debts, there are no liens. This is 100% free and clear of your house. And I was like, yeah, it was pretty cool. After that, I'm trying to think. After that, because I'm self-employed, okay, it's difficult to get loans. And so what I did is I just got a line of credit. Now at the time, in the 90s, they were giving out lines of credit to anybody and everybody. And they were doing signature loans, which means you don't have to have any collateral, which was kind of a dumb move on their part, but nevertheless it was happening, and stated income, which means you're self-employed, we're not gonna ask any questions, we're not gonna look at your tax records, you just put a number on the paper on how much money you make and we're gonna believe you. I was like, okay. And so I did. Now because of that, I ended up, and I flipped a lot of houses, okay? So I really was using real numbers and things, but other people weren't, and then we had a collapse in 2008. Nevertheless, I had a line of credit. Now I had to pay a higher interest rate. I had to pay 12.5% interest on my money, but I didn't have to go through all the process of like getting a loan and closing costs and all those things. And so if you factor it all in, I was still ahead. So I would look at a house, and at the time I could get a very cheap flip house for $25,000 to $35,000, sometimes up to $50,000. And I had a couple $50,000 line of credits, at which point, and there was a point, they just kept writing me more lines of credit. I've got, like I pay my debt. So there was a point I had like $250,000 in lines of credit. And so at any point I could just be like, hey, I need money. In case you don't know how a line of credit works, this is how it works. You can either take the equity in your home or your credit or whatever in the world, and you can have that money available to you. It doesn't cost you anything. It's like a yearly fee of $150 or something like that. And then if you need that money, any amount of that money, up to whatever your limit is, $50,000 in this case, then you just go to the bank and say, I need $50,000 in my account, and they transfer it over. At that moment, you start accruing interest daily, okay? So all you have to pay back is the interest. So if you're at 10% interest on $50,000, then you're gonna have to pay $5,000 per year, roughly, in interest. That's gonna be slightly more because they accrue daily. Nevertheless, if you just pay the interest on that, which would be whatever it is, $500 a month, a little less, then you will never pay it off. But that's all you have to do. And so that's what a lot of people do on all their bills, is they just pay the interest only. Now, I didn't. You can also pay the whole thing off in a day or a month or whatever, however long it takes you to pay it off. And so as soon as I sold the house, I paid off and then I was done. And so whatever the interest was, then I was like, that's what it cost. I don't think I've done like a conventional, normal loan like other people do. Because I've been self-employed for 30 years and my money is confusing to most people and especially to banks. I have not done normal loans. So I've always paid a higher interest and it's always been kind of a complex thing. When I owned a music venue, and so to buy that, I had to get $675,000, okay? And at first I didn't, but then I bought it for $325,000 and I put down $125,000 because at the time I had that much money. And they owner financed the other $200,000 at, I forget what, 8% or 10% or something like that. But then it was amortized across, it took a 30-year loan and amortized it with a balloon payment after 7 or 10 years or something like that. I had to pay a balloon payment. And so basically I was kind of paying interest only. But then on top of that, to make it work, because I still needed another, whatever, $350,000, I maxed out 13 different credit cards that equaled $80,000. I borrowed equity off my house, which was another $50,000 or something like that. And I borrowed from basically everybody that I could, and I found a way and I made it work. And so I've always kind of found a way to make it work. Whether or not it's conventional, I don't care. And so when people are like, oh, I can't apply for a loan, I'm like, you're not trying hard enough. I know lenders, in case you're wanting to buy a house, I know lenders that work with people that have bad credit. I know people that work with people that have bankruptcies, that, you know, like deal with owner financing, even though it's like a third party that just has investors and things like that. I know people that deal with self-employed people, like you can borrow equity on your house, you can sell something, like there are ways to make it work. And whenever you're buying a house, the more money that you put down, then it gives you more leverage, right? So a lender wants to know that you've got skin in the game, that you're not just gonna walk away from this house. And so, for example, if you buy a $400,000 house right now and you put $3,000 down, they're like, who cares about $3,000? You could walk away at any point. But if you buy a $400,000 house and you put $100,000 down, they're like, they're probably not going to walk away from $100,000. And if they do, we've got $100,000 in equity built into this thing. And so the more money that you put down, the higher likelihood that you're going to get the loan and get better interest rate and better terms and things like that. So that's a long answer on how I've done it. I don't do it conventionally, but there is always a way to make it work. And so if you're wanting to buy a house, there is a way. And if you contact me, then I'll give you the information. All right, thanks.